Well, Glenn Beck, I think we have to consider the source on this one. This guy, he's one of these guys who throws nasty jabs out there and then goes and hides behind his plastic Jesus. Yeah, he's one of them. You see, his culture and roots actually come from an FM radio shock jock career. Nowhere in his background is this guy a credited newsman. Does he even have a degree? He's never worked in a newsroom. He's never been a beat reporter, producer, or anchor. You see, folks, his mission is to fire and fire for effect. He appeals to the Joe the Plumbers of the world. He's one of these flag rappers. You know, these guys that are out there that wrap themselves in the flag and then pretend that they're so much more patriotic and love the country so much more than you do. Now let's get to this racist thing. This is not a freedom of speech issue. Here's what Beck said about President Obama.
This president, I think, has exposed himself as a guy over and over and over again who has a deep-seated hatred for white people. I'm not saying that he doesn't like white people. I'm saying he has a problem. This guy is, I believe, a racist.
This is not a one-time gaffe. This is a man who called anti-war activist Cindy Sheehan, after she lost her son in the sting of battle, called her a tragedy whore. This is a man who asked our first Muslim congressman from Minnesota, Keith Ellison, if he can prove to him that he's not working with our enemies. Fox News has distanced itself from Beck's comments about President Obama. They put out a statement today saying Glenn Beck expressed a personal opinion which represented his own views, not those of the Fox News channel. And as with all commentators in the news channel business, he is given the freedom to express his opinions. Well, I want to know, how does Mr. Beck expect people to react when he claims the president has a deep-seated hatred for white people? This is an ongoing narrative that right-wing talkers are spinning to their base. It's the Tea Partiers, it's the birthers, now it's the racist attacks. You have to wonder, when is it ever going to stop? When is there going to be an end game? I'll tell you when there's an end game, when the American people are ready to give distinct definition that this guy is a hate merchant, he peddles hate, and you know, in this business, folks, we can do all kinds of stuff to get ratings. Oh, absolutely. There's all kinds of stories out there. There's all kinds of topics out there. You'd be surprised what we can come up with to get ratings. But the fact is, this man has decided to sell hate on the man you elected to be president of the United States. How sad. Now, I want to know what you think. Here's our text question for tonight. Do you think the right wing's verbal attacks on President Obama are A, free speech, or B, hate speech? Text A for free, B for hate speech to 622-639. We'll bring you the results later on in the show. For more, let me bring in Dr. James Peterson, a professor from Africana Studies at Bucknell University. Professor, good to have you with us tonight. How are we, just about the time we think we're really making progress in this country, that the first black president is elected, gets a mandate of the people, the House, the Senate, and the White House, sweeping change, we're back to square one in many respects with a guy who has a big audience and a guy who has been in broadcasting but has thrown responsibility to the side of the road and decided to turn our president into roadkill. How do you receive a comment like this?
Well, I'm very troubled by it. I want to say at the outset, just to piggyback off of what you're saying, is that Glenn Beck is more of an entertainer than he is a newsman, so we need to keep it in that context. But there's so many reasons why this comment is in poor taste. Number one, there actually are a small pocket of Americans that are deeply troubled by the fact that we have an African-American president.
True.
And unfortunately, the Rush Limbaughs and Glenn Becks play to that audience. They make a lot of money off of that audience, and unfortunately, they're exhorting that audience now towards hate. So we do need to push back a bit, but let's also keep it in context. It's also quite ironic. We have to remember President Obama's mother was white and he was raised by his white grandparents. To say that he hates white culture is absolutely ridiculous. It actually is idiotic if you look at his life and look at what he said about his own life. So he's of mixed race heritage. That's what makes him so unique as the president of the United States. But it's just very, very troublesome to see the hate mongers out there. And I would hope that Glenn Beck, whether he's an entertainer or a news person, person would be a little bit more responsible. There's a very, very thin line between free speech and hate speech here, especially when we think about those audiences that are out there that, again, are actually deeply troubled by the fact that we have our first African-American president.
You know, Professor Peterson, I remember when Trent Lott made some comments about Strom Thurmond. You know, if we'd elected this guy, we wouldn't have had all these other problems, and the uproar that took place across America and the outrage. But yet a broadcaster goes on and makes this kind of declarative statement and doesn't back it up with any examples whatsoever. Is this hate speech in your opinion?
You know what, Ed, it's hate speech for those communities that are going to be incited by it. And again, there's just a small minority of folk who are deeply troubled by the fact that we have an African-American